it is not a regime that is based on one person. We're talking about numerous institutions that, in a way, support each other. And therefore, even when you deal heavy blows against some of these institutions, we do not see any sign yet of regime collapse. To give an example, yes, Iran lost many senior officers, but they were replaced. The fact that, for instance, we see Iran and Hezbollah launching missiles in coordination means that someone at the headquarters is able to conduct this coordination. The fact that they elected temporary substitutes for the supreme leader that was killed, and they speak about electing a new leader right now, again shows you that the institutions still function. We do not see signs of, let's say, people running to the banks. We do not see signs, let's say, of looting, which means loss of control. Therefore, the regime is still functioning. How long? I have no idea, but it is still functioning.
So, President Trump wants a say in choosing the next leader of Iran. Overnight, his defense secretary says the military operation is being ramped up. Here's what Pete Hegseth had to say.
We have only just begun to fight, and fight decisively. If you think you've seen something, just wait. The amount of combat power that's still flowing, that's still coming, that will be able to project over Iran is a multiples of what it currently is right now when you add up our capabilities and those of the Israeli Defense Forces.
Meanwhile, Israel has launched huge strikes in South Beirut, targeting Hezbollah after a mass evacuation order. Well, let's discuss those developments with Professor Meir Litvak, a scholar of Middle Eastern history and Iranian studies at Tel Aviv University. Hello, Professor Litvak. Great to see you this morning on Times Radio. Thank you for your time. What do you see as the primary objectives on each side of the war so far?
Let me start with the Iranian side, which is easier. The Iranian side wants to survive. For the Iranian government, survival means victory because they believe that if they will survive, they will recover at the end. And eventually, like many religious movements, they believe that time is on their side, history is on their side, that in the distant future, at the end of time, Islam will prevail. Therefore, for the Iranian regime, survival is right now the most important goal. From the American and Israeli position, I would say, is the idea is to eventually bring down this the Islamic regime in Iran, in the hope that a new future regime in Iran would be more hospitable, would be more less adversarial, and then a new era can start with Iran's relations with other countries. Israel, I should say, regards Iran as an existential threat because Iran, and we have to remember that, is the only country in the world that has repeatedly and officially called for the elimination of Israel as a state of the Jewish people. Iran also claimed before, 2 years ago, that they surrounded Israel with what they called a ring of fire that eventually intended to bring down Israel. Hezbollah has been and still is Iran's major proxy in the Middle East. And when Hezbollah launched attacks against Israel recently, then Israel saw the opportunity to deal a major blow to Hezbollah, which had emerged as a very important foe of Israel in recent years.
And Professor, when you hear Donald Trump saying he wants the United States to play a role in choosing Iran's next leader, what's your reaction to that? And can he do it?
I think it's a bit far-fetched. With all due respect, Trump apparently believes and hopes that Iran will completely capitulate to the US, maybe something similar to, let's say, Germany in 1945. This is very unlikely as long as there is no land invasion to Iran. I doubt very much that the Iranians would ever agree to such blatant foreign intervention in their own domestic affairs. And therefore, I don't think that it's going to happen. But, dreams are part of the world.
And how resilient do you think the political system of the Islamic Republic is right now?
The system seems to be pretty resilient. We have to remember that Iran, the Islamic Republic, has built a whole area of institutions, security, governance, social institutions, which gives the regime a fairly solid basis. It is not a regime that is based on one person. We're talking about numerous institutions that, in a way, support each other. And therefore, even when you deal heavy blows against some of these institutions, we do not see any sign yet of regime collapse. To give an example, yes, Iran lost many senior officers, but they were replaced. The fact that, for instance, we see Iran and Hezbollah launching missiles in coordination means that someone at the headquarters is able to conduct this coordination. The fact that they elected temporary substitutes for the supreme leader that was killed, and they speak about electing a new leader right now, again shows you that the institutions still function. We do not see signs of, let's say, people running to the banks. We do not see the signs, let's say, of looting, which means loss of control. Therefore, the regime is still functioning. How long? I have no idea, but it is still functioning.
And what do you think are the most plausible endgame scenarios for this war? Is it a negotiated settlement or a major regional escalation as you see it right now?
No, I believe that eventually a settlement will be reached. The question is when and what kind of settlement. I think the Iranians are built on Trump's impatience, on his tendency to switch attention to different issues, and by the way, also that rising oil prices, because of their attacks against Arab Gulf countries in the Middle East, will produce tremendous pressure, domestic pressure on Trump, and will force him to aspire to reach some agreement. I don't believe further escalation we already have an regional escalation. Arab countries, if they join the fight, it would probably be more symbolic than real. And the only, again, escalation can be if the Houthis in Yemen join the fight. But again, this would not change the picture completely. So I think some settlement, whichever it is a more likely scenario.
Professor Meir Litvak, it's been good talking to you. Thank you very much for your thoughts this morning. Well, let's now get the Iranian perspective. Daniela Sepehri is a journalist and human rights activist of Iranian heritage who has family in Iran. She's speaking to us from Berlin. Daniela, thank you very much for joining us this morning. How are you and how are your family?
Yeah, yesterday afternoon, after 6 days of war, we finally got a call from one of our family members who has been saying that they are okay and trying to flee from Tehran, which is difficult, for example, for my grandmother, who is 95 years old. Yeah, since I got that call, I'm a bit more relieved because it's like a psychological torture. If there is a total communication blackout, as we see it right now, the internet is shut down, so our international calls, and it's been really difficult to get in touch with people in Iran.
So have you had no contact whatsoever?
I had a few contacts, just not with my family yet. Luckily, I got reach of them yesterday. I had contacts to a few of my friends and people that I know in Iran, and they have been saying that the situation is extremely dangerous for people. There are no safe spaces for civilians. There are checkpoints everywhere. So the people in Iran are kind of caught between the bombs from the outside and the bullets from the inside. There are a lot of arbitrary arrests of people who have, for example, footage on their phone celebrating the death of Khamenei or the attacks. So the people in Iran are really caught in between these different parties.
And how hopeful are you of regime change?
I was a bit more hopeful when Khamenei was killed, the supreme leader, on Saturday. I think that was a really important step for us. This man is a mass murderer, killing thousands of people, not only in Iran, but throughout the region, Syria, for example, Afghanistan, Yemen. So that gave me a bit of hope. But what I'm seeing now is the reality that after almost a week of war, this regime obviously is still standing, it's still functioning, and my biggest fear, the worst thing that could happen, is that Donald Trump stops this war or loses interest into this war before the regime collapses, and then the people are left behind in Iran with a regime that is seeking revenge from the own people in Iran.
So if you were to describe your feelings over the last 7 days, how your perspective has changed, how would you sum it up?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that my perspective changed. I mean, war is always the worst thing that can happen, even though that a lot of people in Iran and Iranian diaspora thought that this is the only way for this regime to fall. I got a little bit of hope when Khamenei died, but then reality came back in. So what I'm hoping is that the international community does not forget the people in Iran, because it should be about the people, but as we see it from the Israeli side, but also from the US side, no one really cares for the people in Iran. Everyone has their own interest in mind, obviously, as it's always been. But it's at the end, it's the civilians in Iran paying the price. It's the political prisoners that are even more without any protection in the prisons. We hear horrible scenarios coming out from the prisons, from the political prisoners. Their situation is extremely dire, and this is what worries me a lot.
You mentioned political prisoners coming out of the prisons. What effect are you hearing that that's having?
So we have heard of one prison in the Kurdish region of Iran that the prisoners got free. We don't know what exactly happened there. But the situation, for example, in Aviv prison is that we're hearing from family members of the political prisoners that the guards are not feeding the prisoners anymore. Or in the prison Pasha Foyer, we heard that the prisoners heard 5 explosions and they wanted to flee, but the guards violently pushed them back. And that the attacks caused for the mirrors to break, and we don't know if there are any injuries or deaths in the prison. So the situation in the prisons are very chaotic because the regime is not telling the families of the political prisoners anything either.
And when you hear the kind of things that are being said by the US administration, when you hear Donald Trump saying that he wants to have a hand in who becomes the next supreme leader, when you hear Pete Hegseth saying that this will end when we want it to end, what is your reaction to that as an Iranian?
Well, in a utopic world, the people in Iran will choose who will lead the country and how this country should look like. But this is the reality that the US has the power to choose, and we are kind of in the hands of Donald Trump, who can change his ideas and perspectives hourly, not even daily, hourly. And he said that he had people in mind from within Iran, but the people he had in mind were killed, which shows to me, because he's saying that only regime members are being targeted. So it seems like he had members from part of the system in mind, which would be very difficult because the people in Iran do not want the system anymore, and there are not moderate people from the system, or reformists, as we call it in the West. They are just hardliners, and hardliners with a nicer face for the West. And this is not what the people in Iran want. They don't want part of the system leading the country. They want the whole system gone.
Daniela Sepehri, it's good to speak to you, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much for joining us on Times Radio this morning.
Thank you.
Yeah, that thought that she expressed there, that the fear that when Donald Trump was saying that who would be put in place, or who would have a hand being who would be put in place, that would be people who might have been from the previous regime anyway, some of whom are dead, and the fact that the fear that they're showing and having that it will just be replaced by somebody who's palatable to the US. I mean, that must be something very difficult and agonising to be watching from this country and from outside Iran.
I think there's an acknowledgement too of the division within the opposition, and the division when it comes to deciding who that person may or may not be. I think Daniela was hinting at the idea that sort of militancy may even continue beyond any regime change. The other part of her conversation that you were having there, Kate, with her is really interesting, about Trump losing interest before the regime is actually brought to an end, and whether his attention ends up elsewhere and Iran is left even more fragmented and in an even worse position than it was before.
Which kind of brings you back to the question as to what was the intention? I'm still confused as to what the original intention was when these airstrikes started, and what Donald Trump really wants to get out of it, and whether it is now becoming something of a way to sell, I've done it, I've done my job, I'm out, and it doesn't really matter what is happening to the people on the ground. That is the biggest fear.
And the breadth of it is now vast. We're talking sort of 14, 15 countries have been affected by this thing in a week, at least. I may have lost count, actually, to be fair. Let's have a little look at how the front pages of the papers are reflecting on the latest developments, and of course we'll keep you right up to date. There have been missile strikes in various parts of the Middle East overnight. The front page, though, Trump, of the Times, I should say, Trump, I must help to choose Iran's next leader. The Ayatollah's son is a lightweight, says President Trump. So yes, the son of Ayatollah Khamenei is unacceptable and a lightweight, is what the president said.
The language in this is quite astonishing, isn't it? But I mean, it's not, I suppose, not a surprise. We're getting used to it now. But the kind of things that even Pete Hegseth has been saying as well, like toast and things like that. Your
Totally.
toast, it's
and
just
the other part of it is the social media videos that the administration is putting out, which are quite flippant. Actually,
Yeah.
one of them was designed to look like a Call of Duty, like the video game.
yes.
And it's almost, I don't know, superficial. It's almost kind of brushing it off. The other part of some of Trump's comments overnight was he was a little bit flippant about, oh well, some people will die in conflict. That's what happens in a war.
I know.
It's kind of like, really, is that the right message?
Doesn't really fill you with confidence, does it?